Welcome, everybody. I am so happy to be here with some eminent guests, with the photographer Carlos Cárdenes and his wonderful wife, Gelsis. I'd like to begin by thanking Iraida and all of my colleagues and friends at the Cuban Cultural Center of New York. They have supported this idea of a contemporary Cuban artist series. And so we have done several interviews, but this is a very special one for me to introduce you to Carlos's photography. And Gelsis knows I always introduce her as Carlos's muse, Carlos's agent,
Right.
because she is the invisible hands behind the scenes.
Yes,
yes. So I invited her to be part of this interview. And I'd like to begin by just telling you a little bit about Carlos. And then I'm going to tell you a little bit about an article that just came out on his work. And then we're just going to casually back and forth have a wonderful conversation this afternoon.
Okay, sounds good.
So, sound good to you?
Yes.
So Cuban-born artist Carlos Manuel Cárdenes is a distinguished professional with over 35 years of expertise in commercial and artistic photography. His extensive career has been marked by numerous exhibitions, including several out here in Colorado and across the United States, showcasing his exceptional talent and unique photographic vision. Cárdenes left Cuba with his family in August 1961 at the age of 16. He is a graduate of the Miami Photography College and attended Miami-Dade College. His commitment to photographic excellence led him to participate in the renowned Ansel Adams workshops at Yosemite National Park in California, and further solidifying his expertise in the art of visual storytelling, which is really a superb way, I think, of describing the work that you will be seeing. And I will be opening up a PowerPoint so that you can see some of these particular images we're going to be talking about. And if you have interest in this, and I'll kind of hold this up, my article on Carlos's work just appeared in Cuban Studies last summer. It's volume number 53. So I encourage you to take a look at that. But I am going to open up our screen right now, and then we will look at some of these amazing images. So I want to tell everybody that this first image is actually a self-image of Carlos.
That's right, yes.
Carlos, am I correct? This was at the first major exhibition of this Faces series, which we'll be discussing in a little bit. Was it at the Freedom Tower? Am I correct about that?
Yes, Freedom Tower, yes.
Yeah. So Carlos may be talking about this, specific image, or we may go back and forth to various images just to illustrate some of the technique and the thinking of Carlos's work. But I'd like to begin, and Gelsis, I invite you to join us in this conversation. Anything that occurs to you, you'd like to add, just jump right in. Okay, don't be shy.
No, I actually wanted to add a little something here because Carlos' exhibition took place in 2010 and at the Freedom Tower, and it was the place where he was processed.
In 1961.
In 1961.
Wow. The immigration was in that building.
That's really coming full circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wow. Very, very emotional. Well, I'd like to begin by asking you, Carlos and Gelsis, just to talk about how you became interested in photography as a medium. And then to go on and talk a little bit about your technique, which I think is very, very unique in many ways. So yeah, I'd just like to open it up to invite you to talk about where did you begin?
Okay, thank you, Andrea and Iraida. It's a pleasure being here with you guys. I don't do this often, but I'm going to do my best. If I go back to my early years, I always was impressed by a very small camera, a Kodak, a black box camera. And I said, well, how from this camera are we going to be able to see a photograph? And that took me to get involved in taking photographs, developing, and it was something that excited me. And I thought it was a beautiful thing to do, documenting life, you know, and that's how it started. Now,
How old were you, Carlos?
I
Do you
was,
remember how old you were?
I was 15 years old, 14 years old in that area. My aunt, she had cameras. My uncle had a camera. So when we went out to the beach, to the park, they took the cameras and they took some photographs and they allowed me to use the camera. And, you know, it was very exciting, you know, to me.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
the mechanical aspect of the camera and the film, that's what really intrigued me.
So this was just before you came to the US.
That was in Cuba, yes, yes.
Yeah. And did you have your own camera that you brought with you?
No, at that
or-
time I was using my aunt camera,
Mhm.
but eventually, my first camera I was purchased the day I got married with this beautiful lady next to me. I went to the camera store and bought a Kodak camera, and that night we went to Italy, and that's how photography started for me.
Wow. Beautiful.
We documented our experience in Italy, and when I came back, I printed the roll of film, and out of 180 images, 180 came out. So I said, wow,
Wow.
it was amazing.
Wow. Amazing.
Yes.
And these were manual images. This is before we had any kind of electronic trickery, right?
Yeah, no digital. Everything was film.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well-
and go ahead.
No, you go. You go.
And that's basically what it was. And then I started taking photographs and developing my own roll of film. And then move into some other equipment through life and try to, basically what it is I try to record my experiences in this planet, to have a memory, a visual memory, because when you print it, the image, that image is going to be there forever. So that's what really attracted me to photography.
And I'm thinking, Carlos, I know I want to mention to the audience, because we have been working together many years. And one of the things that's striking about your work, especially today, is that even if you use a digital camera, you don't edit that you have this idea of a photographer's eye. You know, the photographers I know talk about how when they're looking, their gaze is different than the average person, that they see an image and they capture it. You know, they frame an image and they capture it. And I wonder if you would speak about that a little bit.
Well, if we use the Cuban project, Faces, 100 Cuban artists, as an example, it's basically documenting a meeting with an artist. And when I'm doing that, I'm speaking to him. Basically, what I did was I purchased every single book on Cuban art, and I studied their work before I met him. When we sat down, he told me his story and what he was doing, why he was doing it. And while we are speaking, I'm building the images in my head. I'm in the studio looking at the his work in the walls, and I see his painting, and I hear his voice, and I'm building the image, what I'm going to do. And it's about deep inside feelings that I feel I'm the same like him. I'm a Cuban that came from Cuba in 1961. They coming after me, but they're feeling the same experiences that I did. So we are in the same area, in the same boat, for example. And I comprehend them exactly the same because I went through the same experiences. So they're trying to make it work, move forward. And I saw, well, maybe with this project, taking photograph of this artist, we can publish a book and give them a hand so they can be known in the United States.
Yeah, and I definitely want to come back to ask you more questions about faces. But when I interviewed you the very first time, and some of this comes from the article, you talked about the photographer's ability or the photograph's ability to immobilize or arrest moments. At moments that, in your words, would never be recreated, that you catch something in time and space that maybe perhaps nobody even caught, right? Therefore, these are things that would not be remembered otherwise. And so I always think of Roland Barthes, who meditated on photography quite a bit, you know, in Camera Lucida. And, you know, he talks about this idea that the camera serves as an instrument of memory and thereby gives that subject historical meaning, even if it's outside the context. I think about your work in Italy, and I've seen so much of your work as you've traveled, you know, that you capture something that is almost invisible to the naked eye. And so I wonder if you could comment on that, and then we'll talk more about faces. And Gelsies, I'm curious to hear what you think about this, because you've observed Carlos for so many years doing this. So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
I try to be as honest as I can. Photography to me is about feelings. It can be people, it can be nature, it can be architecture, it can be spaces, day, night. It's the moment that I feel inside and visually, I see something attractive, something very interesting. The shade of white and black, the colors, the light, the shadows, all that, I try to combine all that information into one image, into one negative. So sometimes it takes a while, and sometimes it takes many shots. But eventually, the more photograph you take, the better you become, because it's about speed. It's about a fraction of a second that you want to capture life.
Yeah, and that reminds me of this idea of the photographer's gaze, which is so particular. Kelsey, what are your thoughts just listening to Carlos?
Actually, as we were talking about this topic and the gaze and what he extracts from people, which is something amazing, it reminded me when he went to document the Mariel boat lift. And it was just one day that he was there. And I mean, I still get goosebumps when I see the images that he took there, the people that were like, so, you know, what is going to be my future? You know, I've just come in a boat that with hundreds of people that I don't know. And their faces, the faces that he captured that day were, you don't even have to say anything, you can feel it.
Yeah, yes.
It was a wonderful series too. And it explains what you're saying is that it's just, it's not just the face, it's the feeling inside.
Yeah.
That
Yeah,
was
you
wonderful.
create a whole emotional landscape in your photography. And, you know, I'm thinking in this case of the more spontaneous work that you've done. And like I said, we'll talk about faces in a minute. But I think about some of the photographs you have shown me over the years from different parts of the world. And the photographs you took in Cuba when you did return, you know, and even capturing, you know, it's this storytelling element of your work that many times a visual narrative, a visual image is more powerful than words. Because, you know, for example, I think of a particular photograph that you sent me, you know, of a railing, you know, with the rust on it in Havana, you know, which speaks volumes about this passage of time and this grandeur and beauty that still remains, but in a state of decay or deterioration. So I know exactly what you're talking about, Gelsies. Carlos, what are you thinking as you're listening to us?
I think it's beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah, because, you know, I would talk often with my students about this idea that the literary theorist Wolfgang Iser has, is that the meaning of a piece of work, whether it's a piece of literature or music or art, you know, the plastic arts, is somewhere in between the observer, the viewer, and that image, right? In this case, as that meaning is created there, you know. But then I also think about this idea that I'm very interested in, that Barth, you know, Roland Barthes on the one hand said that this, you know, the image, the photograph on the one hand gives historical meaning or significance, you know, sometimes in the face of oblivion, you know, whether it's political oblivion, as we'll talk about, you know, with Cuba, or whether it's just historical, you know, oblivion, and the, you know, the prospect of facing our own mortality and asking ourselves philosophical questions about, you know, about the meaning of our lives. But then Bart and Susan Sontag also, you know, famously talk about, at the same time, though, the meaning lies outside the frame, right? So
Well,
it's both.
Here's an example right here that you have Rafael Soriano. I'm looking at that image, Andrea, and what I think about it is what's behind it. What's behind it is his work, but it's what's in his head, really, in my opinion. It's mystical, mythical. It's just that, as you were talking about this topic right now, it just came to me that, and I've seen this image a million times, but the topic that you're bringing about bringing something that nobody can capture, I think that image captured Soriano's inner thoughts.
As you can see, Soriano is sitting next to a window. To me, light is very important. The lighting. In all the images in the book, I only use one light.
Wow.
And then the light was installed outside the house, outside the window. So when the light comes in, it looks like it's a window light.
Yeah.
But it's a flash outside. And that's it. Only one light. And that's how I express myself that way. I like the shadows. I got the light. You know, the simplicity of the position, him sitting in the chair. the background, the painting, you can see what he works on. The tools on the left, the brushes, the desk where he draws. A quiet place. To me, it's one of my best photographs because I love him. He passed away a couple of years ago, but he
Yeah.
was a beautiful person.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And you
I
know
look
what I'm
at it.
thinking?
I look at
I'm
it.
sorry,
And
Chris.
it's
Yeah.
like I fall in love with him again.
Yeah. No, I understand. And do you know what I'm thinking too is I worked with Rafael on my first collection of testimonios, and oftentimes when people speak about him, they speak about the color in his work.
Uh-huh.
And you have literally, put light on a completely different dimension of the artist. On the one hand, there's more attention to form, right? Because you're not distracted by the colors.
By the colors, yeah.
Yeah. And the light, brings you front center onto him and his face. And then of course, the tools. So you have illuminated literally a very different aspect of this artist, this very important artist. And this opens up, it's a segue to talk about faces, because just to give people an idea about this, is that this is a project that you began in, am I correct, in 2007? Is that right?
Yeah.
2007, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And the project was a response to this disappearing, right? This wiping out of Cuban history, Cuban memory, because as many of the folks in the audience know, is that when artists contested the regime, or when they left the island, they were disappeared in the
That's right.
annals of Cuban, art history.
Mhm.
And many of the artists who I interviewed for Cuban artists across the diaspora, and in my work with Cuban artist Leandro Soto Café, talked about this idea that you alluded to, that they were erased, and many, like Leandro, like Rafael, were established artists in Cuba. And when they left Cuba, there were two competing narratives about them. On the one hand, on the island, they ceased to exist. Their work was taken out of museums, galleries, books, everything. But then when they left Cuba, gallerists and kind of the art circuit in the not just the United States, across the world, deemed them, well, not really quite Cuban artists, because they were not producing art in Cuba. And you also have the complication of, the Western art circuit, which often dismisses non-Western artists. So you've got all these competing forces with artists, like you said, Carlos, were, got here wherever they arrived, Spain, Venezuela, Mexico, etc. And they were unknown, and their artistic identities were completely troubled. They were asking questions like, who are we, right? And
Mhm.
so this prompted you in part to begin recording these artists. And one of the things I want to tell the audience, and then ask you to talk more about your inspiration for this and the various works in this ongoing series, is that the project had what I call democratic aims.
Correct.
It began with a word of mouth, with people talking, but then you just opened up the possibility, because you had all of these artists who were reaching out to you, of just photographing all of these artists. Okay. And this work is very, even though these are portraits, as the audience can already see, this is very distinct from traditional portraiture. And I'm going to ask you to talk about that a little bit. And fundamentally, this project, as I see it, and you have both expressed to me, is about preserving this history. It's a visual archive of a history that has been overlooked, dismissed, and many times, disappeared. So in that sense, it has an elegiac aim, okay, to preserve and to remember. So I'd like to throw it over to both of you to talk a little bit more about what inspired you to do this project. And then I'll ask you some questions about your technique, which you started to share with us already.
Okay. When I started recording the artists, I never saw the end of the line. I'm a type of person that I start working, and while I'm working, we're building something positive. And from one artist, I went to the other one, to the other one, and I start accumulating a group of photographs. And everybody was asking, well, what are you going to do with that? I don't know. We're just going to do something with it. So after I had about 50 images of artists, I went to Miami-Dade College. I presented to the art director there, and he immediately says, yes, we're going to have a show. But let's keep shooting, and let me know when you're going to be able to show them. So I went up to 134 artists. Now the problem was, no, the problem was, the issue was, I'm going to be showing portraits of artists in a gallery, and every single one have to be different than the other one. I can just have the same image in the same studio. So that way I was not only going and shooting and getting to know him, but do something different every time the artist exposed to me with the same idea of recording their life, their journey, their future. We spoke about the exile. We spoke about difficulties like everybody has every time you leave your country, go to a new country. How you going to make it? But they were very talented, and their work was accepted by society in Miami and in other states. And most of them, some of them came through Mexico, others came from France, Spain, and they came to Miami. So the trajectory of them, it was very impressive and moved me to keep working and keep showing the work.
Yelsis, do you want to chime in and share your thoughts? Because you were there at the very beginning
all the
of
time.
this incredible project.
Yeah, well, like he said, he started with just a few artists. But then, like he said earlier, it was almost word of mouth. He didn't have to call them, they started to call him. And also, he reached out to this lady that she's a gallerist here that I want to give her credit, Bernice Staumbaum. Wonderful. She said, oh, Carlos, this is an amazing project, and I'm going to start giving you some names. And she did. And she also promoted.
She helped a lot.
She helped tremendously. So, and along came, like he said, 132 artists. When I'll tell you about the exhibit was fantastic.
Very moving.
The way whoever you planned it, the way he planned the images, one right after the other, so perfectly lined up in a gray background, they just really stood out a lot. But the most incredible part was the first day of the exhibit. It was such a joyous time because practically all the artists that were in that exhibit came, and they were talking about this portrait and that portrait, and they would put themselves together and look at this and look at it. Was just such a happy moment for everyone.
But it was very emotional to me.
Yes.
Let's put it that way.
It must have been incredible. And I wonder if you could expand on what you started to talk about in terms of how you took the time with each artist to contextualize their work. And here, although ultimately you made the decision in terms of how to present them, it was a collaborative project, you know, which, as we've been talking about, was ultimately a project of recuperation, of an inventory of the past, if you will, and of the present, which of course is, you know, kind of announces the future too of Cuban art and proves that Cuban art continues to flourish off the island. So if you would talk about that technique a little bit, Carlos.
All right. I was going to say that they gave me the permission to do whatever I wanted to do. They did not control the canvas was going to be behind them or where they're going to be sitting. They allow me to express myself because they look at me as an artist too. So I gave them the freedom, they gave me the freedom, and we started working, and sometimes it came like these two minds together to express the same feelings on an image. And that's how the work came out. It was simple, but at the same time, it was very intense in a sense of listening to their experience, especially what I'm looking at Leandro Soto. Leandro Soto was something else. It was so personal. He practiced the Buddhist religion, and it does a lot of meditations. He went to India many times. He behaved like a very peaceful human being, accepting everybody. So he started talking to me, speaking to me about his mother, about him when he was a little kid. And I decided to use those images because in India, the ladies, they put a black dot, black or red dot between the eyes,
Yeah,
in the forehead. And that's where I put his mother, because he spoke a lot about his mom.
may I just interject one thing? And this is really interesting, Carlos. His wife, Grisel, told me that this was her mother.
Yes.
That he was so close with her.
That was her mother.
Yes.
Yeah, and she was also a practitioner of, you know, meditation, and, you know, very attracted to Hinduism, and inspired the two of them. So it actually is his mother, but that's, yeah, this idea of that, you know, that's who is there on his mind. It also reminds me of a technique that Frida Kahlo used, you know, somebody on your mind, you know, almost like the third eye that sees, you know?
Yes, the third eye.
Yeah, yeah. And if we could use this image, because I think it's a superb example, because you also overlay it with natural objects from the natural world. And I'm wondering, what did you talk about with Leandro when you decided to integrate these elements?
these elements were one of his exhibitions. So I took photograph of him and the photograph of the mother of his wife, and there is another one photograph here that is him when it was a little child on the left. And there was a lot of plants, foliage in the work of art. And I put all that together because it was
Yeah.
it was there, you know, it was the day that I met him, and the way he spoke about nature and life.
Yeah.
It's a moment where you lose your conscience and where you are, and you are moving to someplace else.
Yeah, and I know at the, Leandro, if anybody knew him, was always working in multiple mediums, at the same time. And he told me, and Grisel kind of emphasizes, that he was very interested in collage. And this series had to do with tobacco, which of course has deep meaning in Cuban history, both, troubled history, but also fundamental history, right? In terms of the indigenous peoples and
Yes.
tobacco, and then the way Cuba was colonized. And Leandro also studied with a shaman in Tabasco. And so the sense of spirituality, the mystic kind of elements, his ability to access, is all speaks in this photograph. All of that is present. And, again, for the audience to understand that, unlike traditional portraiture, which really has its own kind of strict, understandings and regulations and things like this, this is, a collaborative process in which two artists are collaborating, because your vision and also taking the time to look at the subject and speak to the subject and then put into high relief, what is important to this individual person, so that we have a much more comprehensive understanding of the artist. It's an extraordinary process. It's extraordinary.
Thank you. It really, I was very lucky, let's put it that way. I was very lucky, and I'm proud of what it came out and what bringing these people, expose them to life here in the United States.
Absolutely.
They had the talent. They had the talent. They're very good artists, and they came in and they start showing in galleries and start moving forward again. It's beautiful, and they gave me an opportunity to do this type of work. I'm always been grateful to them for that.
Well, they were very fortunate. And, again, not to kind of keep repeating this, but I'm thinking as I listen to you, that we often encounter a work of art in isolation, and here this gives you a much larger, deeper understanding of the artist.
Mhm.
And I wonder, Gelsis, is there anything else you would like to add, either about this particular image or anything that has to do with this series?
Actually, that Carlos was able to self-publish the book with a lot of effort, because he had people that wrote about the book and they're in the book, and it was a lot of work to produce the book, and he never gave up.
Yeah.
And I
And we
think
wouldn't mind finding a publisher who would like to reprint it.
it
So
would
anybody
be-
who's listening out there,
it
you
would
know,
be
This is
wonderful because
this is the Mr.
yeah,
Leandro is in
This
the
is
cover.
Leandro in the cover book.
yeah. And I wonder, Carlos, before we come to our last couple of questions, would you tell the audience how they can access your website?
How what?
How they can access your website?
Oh, you can, my website is carloscardenes.com, www.carlosmcardenes.com.
Beautiful. Well, I'm going to stop sharing. And I have two more questions for you. And I'm going to ask Elsie's you this question first.
Okay.
So in your view, what is Carlos's legacy?
Mm.
Carlos's legacy right now, because who knows, there could be something else in the future, but right now is more that of promoting artists that came from Cuba, and like he says, giving them an opportunity to be not famous, but to expose their work here. Because, like you said, Andrea, once they left Cuba, they were completely erased, totally erased from any documentation or anything. So, having given them a voice, to me, would be his well, actually, maybe two legacies. And the other legacy is the work that he did in Cuba when we went in 2016 and 17. He calls that work erasing, what was that?
Remembering the past and erasing the present.
Yes, which
The-
are images that are sort of
They're
out of focus. Or
the images that are moving.
Yeah.
The thing is, before I go out and pick up my camera and go out and shoot, I need to have a reason why I'm going to do that. It's a plan. So when I went to Cuba, I spent many weeks thinking about what I'm going to document in Cuba that have not been documented. So I felt like I'm going to go to a place that I knew when I was a kid, and I go to a place now that is completely destroyed. So how can I put those two things together in one image? And that's what I did. All my work was done like that. That it's Havana, but you cannot see the building or cannot see the person because it's a feeling that I have inside that how much that system destroyed, erased that city, the Havana. It's something else. It's sad.
So again,
And when you go there,
the
when you
art
go
is
there,
conceptual, it's metaphorical, has a metaphorical aspect
Exactly.
because the form, the technique actually speaks to the themes that you're trying to
metaphor.
convey.
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
what is missing in the photograph is the smell and the sound. That's the
Yeah.
only thing it's missing. Everything else is there. But I tried to bring all that together. And let me tell you, many times when I put my eye in the viewfinder, I was crying.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I felt it. I felt the destruction and the anxiety of the people.
Yeah.
Their faces. They were looking at you and they were saying like, please help me. It was very touching.
Yeah.
Very touching.
Yeah. And, you often hear, though, when you're focusing on one of the senses, so you just mentioned there was no sound or smell, it amplifies what you're seeing, right? And of course, blurring the images, right? metaphorically speaks to what you're just discussing. So Carlos, how would you answer that question? What do you believe? What do you hope your legacy will be?
What I hope to do, what?
What will be your
What do you,
legacy? What do you want to leave behind?
yeah, what do you hope your legacy is?
I just want to keep working.
Mhm.
And that they allow that legacy to be there. I'm happy with the way my life is.
Mhm.
I'm happy with what I do. I'm happy every day. You know, I have published 75 books. I do printing. My work. People come and buy some prints, and I don't want to make money. I just want them to have a piece of my life.
Yeah.
And
Beautiful.
if anybody comes to my house and look at my work, and that makes me feel good.
Yeah. Of
Right
course.
now, I'm trying to teach people that wants to start doing photography. They come to my house and we speak about photography, and they see my work, and that's what I do.
Beautiful. So here's my Baroque question so that we close out. And this gives you an opportunity to tell me, what did I not ask you that we need to know to understand your work, your experience, your history? What have I not asked you? What do you want to tell us? And I'll ask both of you that.
Well, I already I believe I expressed that before. The main thing that photography has done for me, that I be able to express myself through an image. And believe me, I put a lot of feelings into a photograph. Maybe you don't see it when you look at a photograph, but if you ask me, I can explain it to you. But that's what I'm leaving behind. My experience in life, the way I felt about the environment. I capture that. You know, Mariel was what, 1970?
1980.
1980. It's been what, 30 years?
Mhm.
So documentation of history to me is very important, especially something that I went through,
Mhm.
that I felt it, that it was painful. And all my emotions are there.
Yeah. No, you're bearing witness to
Mhm.
history. And with this last project, particularly the Faces, not the last project, but the Faces project, again, you're creating a visual archive that at the end of the day becomes not just a testament to this work, to this body of work and the artist behind it, but that this tradition continues to flourish inside and outside the island. Yeah, go ahead.
You know, it's beautiful when I go to a gallery and I meet one of these guys. Hey, Carlos, how you doing? How are you? You know, after so many years. And I have brand new 140 friends that I never thought I was going to meet in my life. And it's beautiful. I love
I
it.
know you're a popular guy. In fact, you made quite a splash when you were out here in Colorado. Just so the audience knows, Carlos had a full exhibition at the Sangre de Cristo Art Center in Pueblo as
Yes.
part of a huge extravaganza called Cuba Transnational, and then consequently donated that artwork to the University of Colorado. And every time I walk through the library, I love looking at people looking at those images, because there are always people clustered around this images. So Colorado has adopted Carlos and Gelsey's.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's
Gelsey,
sort
what?
of, it's
Yeah.
sort of, we traveled so much there because his family was there that it also became a second home. But
Yeah.
the question that you asked Yeah, I did think of something, which is we try every day to promote Cuban everything to our grandchildren.
Mhm.
If there's any exhibit or any something, a historical date or something, we're always letting them know. Because for our daughter, she got it, she got it because she was raised with my parents and with us, but it's that third generation that we hope that we can instill, that that they still have Cuban blood in them, and never to forget that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful, beautiful thing. That's a beautiful note.
Mhm.
Carlos, you have the last word.
What can I tell you? I'm so happy to be here tonight, this afternoon, and I'm proud of every single artist that I met. I'm proud of what we have done. I'm proud of what we are doing. And I'm happy with myself because when I go to bed at night, I feel good. I feel
Well,
positive. I feel good.
that is a beautiful way to end this. I love you dearly, and this is an incredible honor for me to continue to work with you, but also to share this extraordinary work, with the audience. And, I want to remind people again, to take a look at this article because it will speak in more depth about Carlos's work, but also take a look at the website because there are hundreds of images.
And I
We just
have to
selected a few.
I have to congratulate you. You've uh,
Oh yes,
always been, I don't know,
you
my big tree next to me.
yes.
Well, this work is extraordinary. And part of the idea behind this series is to share this work broadly. For partly the reason you say, the Cuban Cultural Center of New York and Iraida at the helm is an extraordinary institution because they are not just preserving a long tradition of Cuban, production, whether it's artwork or music or theater or literature, whatever it happens to be, but they also promote this, and it's multi-generational, which goes back to what you were saying, Kelsey. So, for me, it's an honor to be part of this, organization, but also to be working with extraordinary artists and also seeing that artists don't work alone. They have lots of people supporting them,
That's right.
like
Yeah.
you, Kelsey. So thank you so much for this. I want to tell the audience that this interview will be followed by a live Q&A. Iraida will post the link. So if you just sign out of this link and go to the other link, you'll have an opportunity to ask the artist your own questions because we've just touched on a couple things here. So we look forward to seeing folks in a couple minutes. Thank you both for this
Thank
time.
you.
Thank you.
It's been a
Bye-bye.
pleasure.